The silent arrival. The Xylarians had never known fear like this before. Their world, Xylaris, was a paradise of lush green valleys and sparkling blue oceans. Peaceful and advanced, they were known for their wisdom and diplomacy. But now their cities were in ruins, smoke rising into the once clear skies. The Kargath horde, a race of savage conquerors, had come without warning, attacking with brutal force. Their weapons tore through Xylarian defenses like paper. Their warriors showed no mercy, destroying everything in their path. The Xylarians tried to negotiate, but the Kargath only laughed, their monstrous faces filled with cruel delight. There was no reasoning with them, no escape from their wrath. Desperate, the Xylarian High Council sent a distress signal. It echoed across the galaxy, a cry for help that begged for mercy and protection. "Please, if anyone is out there, save us," the message pleaded, but the galaxy remained silent. The Galactic Council received the signal first. In their grand chamber, surrounded by golden pillars and shining lights, the leaders of powerful civilizations gathered. They listened to the Xylarian plea but quickly turned away. "The Kargath are too strong," one alien leader whispered, his eyes wide with fear. "To help them would mean war with the Horde," another agreed, shaking his head. The vote was swift and unanimous. No one would come to Xylaris' aid. It was too dangerous. Meanwhile, on the burning world below, the Xylarians watched in despair. Their hopes crumbled as they realized no one would save them. Their pleas had fallen on deaf ears. But just when all seemed lost, the distress signal reached a distant part of the galaxy. Far beyond the borders of the Galactic Council's territory, on a planet known as Earth, a lone satellite picked up the call. Its signal flashed through human communication networks, reaching the command center of the United Earth Fleet. Captain Elias Ward stood before a massive screen, his sharp eyes narrowing as he listened to the Xylarian message. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched. The human commander was known for his fierce loyalty and unyielding sense of justice. He knew what had to be done. "Prepare the fleet," Captain Ward ordered, his voice firm and steady. His crew looked at him in surprise. "Sir, we don't know these aliens. It's not our fight," one officer argued. "They are innocent, and they are being slaughtered," Ward replied coldly. "That makes it our fight." The officers exchanged nervous glances. They had heard the stories, the legends of the Kargath horde. Facing them was madness, but they knew better than to question their captain's orders. "Yes, sir," they replied in unison, saluting sharply before rushing to prepare the fleet. Massive warships powered up, their engines roaring to life. Rows of sleek, silver starfighters lined the launch decks, pilots climbing into their cockpits with grim determination. The United Earth Fleet was known across the galaxy as the most powerful military force ever created, and now it was mobilizing for war. Captain Ward watched from the bridge of his flagship, the Valkyrie, a colossal battleship armed with devastating firepower. His gaze was cold, his mind focused on the mission ahead. "Set course for Xylaris," he commanded. "Maximum speed." The navigator's fingers danced over the controls, and the stars outside the window blurred as the ship jumped to hyperspace. Meanwhile, on Xylaris, the Xylarians continued to suffer. The Kargath showed no mercy, their armies marching through the burning cities, tearing down everything in sight. Hope was fading fast, replaced by terror and despair. But high above, in the dark void of space, the first human warship exited hyperspace, its massive silhouette casting a shadow over the planet. One by one, the rest of the fleet appeared, hundreds of battleships, cruisers, and fighters forming a vast armada. The Xylarians looked up in shock and fear, their hearts pounding as they recognized the symbols on the ships. They were the markings of Earth, the Deathworlders. Legends spoke of them as ruthless warriors from a harsh and violent planet. Stories of their brutal wars and unbreakable spirit were whispered across the galaxy. The Xylarians had always believed them to be just myths, exaggerations, but now Those legends had come to life before their very eyes. The Hylarrians trembled, unsure whether to feel hope or fear. Had their saviors arrived? Or was this just another nightmare? On board the Valkyrie, Captain Ward stared down at the burning world below, his face hard and unyielding. "Open a channel to the Kargath," he ordered. The communication officer complied, linking the frequencies. "This is Captain Elias Ward of the United Earth Fleet," he announced, his voice echoing across the Kargath command channels. "Leave this world, or face the wrath of Deathworlders." Silence followed, thick and tense. Then, the Kargath commander's voice growled back, dripping with arrogance and malice. "You dare challenge us, human?" The alien sneered. "You will burn just like the rest of them." Captain Ward's eyes narrowed, his expression as cold as ice. "Then let it burn," he said, his voice low and deadly. "Open fire." With a single command, the human fleet unleashed its fury, blazing weapons lighting up the dark void of space. The battle for Xylaris had begun. The Kargath horde did not expect resistance. They had crushed countless worlds, their conquests swift and merciless. But as the first human warships opened fire, they realized this fight would be different. Blinding beams of energy tore through space, slamming into Kargath cruisers with explosive force. The shockwaves rippled across the battlefield, shaking even the most seasoned Kargath warriors. Hulls shattered, engines exploded, and pieces of twisted metal spun into the void. On the bridge of the Valkyrie, Captain Elias Ward stood firm, his eyes locked on the chaos unfolding before him. He showed no emotion, no hesitation. This was war, and he was here to end it. "Focus fire on their command ship," Ward ordered, his voice cold and steady. "Cut off the head, and the body will fall." The Earth fleet moved with precision and discipline. Squadrons of sleek starfighters darted through enemy lines, their weapons blazing. They weaved around enemy fire, their agility unmatched. Human pilots, trained on the harsh, dangerous world of Earth, were fearless and relentless. The Kargath were caught off guard. They had heard of humans. Deathworlders, they were called. Beings from a violent, deadly planet where only the strongest survived. But the legends didn't compare to the reality. The humans fought with a ferocity the Kargath had never encountered. On the bridge of the Kargath flagship, Commander Grothar watched in shock. His massive, muscular form tensed as he witnessed his fleet being torn apart. His yellow eyes narrowed, filled with rage. "What are these creatures?" he growled, his claws digging into the armrest. "They are just humans, mere Deathworlders." An officer turned, fear evident in his trembling voice. "Commander, their weapons, their tactics, we cannot hold them off." Grothar's fangs gleamed as he snarled. "Then fight harder. Show them the power of the Kargath." But even as his orders were shouted across the ship, the reality was clear. The Kargath were losing. For the first time, their prey was fighting back, and winning. The Valkyrie led the charge, its massive cannons firing in synchronized bursts. Each shot was devastating, punching through Kargath shields like paper. Enemy ships exploded one after another, consumed by fiery blasts. Captain Ward watched with cold satisfaction. "Keep pressing the attack. Don't give them a chance to regroup," he commanded. "Yes, sir," his officers replied, their fingers dancing over the controls. The Kargath tried to counterattack, their ships unleashing volleys of plasma and missile barrages. But the human fleet was ready. Advanced shields absorbed the blasts, while agile fighters intercepted missiles mid-flight. Earth's technology was not just powerful, it was adaptable and resilient. In the midst of the battle, a squadron of human fighters broke through the Kargath lines, targeting the enemy flagship. They flew with deadly precision, dodging enemy fire with ease. Their leader, a fearless pilot named Lieutenant Kara Hayes, grinned as she lined up her shot. "Target locked. Firing now," she shouted, her ship's cannons blazing. The shot slammed into the Kargath flagship's engines, causing them to erupt in a burst of flames. The mighty vessel shuddered, its power flickering. On board, Commander Grothar felt the impact, his eyes widening in disbelief. "No, this cannot be," he roared, fury boiling within him. But the humans showed no mercy. The Valkyrie closed in, its cannons charging for a final devastating blast. Captain Ward's voice echoed through the bridge. "End this." The cannons fired, a beam of energy so bright it lit up the entire battlefield. It tore through the Kargath flagship, ripping it apart from bow to stern. The explosion was massive, a fiery shockwave that shook every ship nearby. The remaining Kargath forces hesitated, their morale shattered. Their commander was gone, their fleet in ruins. For the first time in their history, the Kargath knew fear. But Captain Ward did not allow them to retreat. He ordered his fleet to push forward, driving the enemy back with ruthless efficiency. The Deathworlders showed no mercy, their determination unbreakable. On the surface of Xylaris, the Xylarians watched the battle with wide eyes, their hearts pounding. They saw the humans fighting not just with power, but with purpose. They were fierce, unyielding, and terrifyingly effective. The Xylarians had heard stories of Earth, the death world where only the strong survived. Now they understood the truth. These humans were warriors forged in fire, shaped by a world that showed no kindness. And now, that strength was being unleashed to save them. Hope flickered in the Xylarians' hearts, but it was mixed with fear. They were saved, but at what cost? Who were these Deathworlders who fought with such cold fury? As the last Kargath ships were destroyed, Captain Ward stood on the bridge, watching the remnants of the enemy fleet drift into the void. His face remained hard, his eyes cold. "Send a message to all ships. Begin rescue operations on Xylaris," he ordered. The fleet moved swiftly, dropships descending to the planet's surface. But even as the Xylarians looked up with gratitude and relief, one question haunted them. Were these humans their saviors, or something far more dangerous? On the surface of Xylaris, the air was thick with smoke and dust. The once beautiful cities lay in ruins, shattered by the Kargath's brutal assault. The Xylarians hid in the rubble, their slender bodies trembling with fear. They had heard the explosions above, seen the sky light up with violent flashes. Whispers filled the shadows as survivors huddled together, their large, dark eyes wide with terror. "The Kargath are unstoppable," one elder murmured, his voice shaking. "No one can defeat them, not even the ancient guardians of old." But then, the sky began to change. The flashes of battle stopped, replaced by the roar of engines. Massive ships descended, their silhouettes sharp and menacing. The Xylarians watched, their hearts pounding. Were these more invaders? Was their suffering not over yet? The dropships touched down, kicking up clouds of dust. The ramps lowered, and figures emerged, tall, armored, and powerful. They moved with confidence, their steps heavy and deliberate. Their eyes were cold, scanning the ruins with precision. The Xylarians gasped. These were not Kargath. These were the humans, the Deathworlders. The stories were true. Creatures from a planet so dangerous, so violent, that only the strongest could survive. And now, they stood on Xylaris, their weapons gleaming under the dim light. Captain Elias Ward led the landing party, his expression hard and unyielding. His armor was dark and battle-worn, his face carved from stone. He looked around, assessing the devastation with sharp, calculating eyes. "Begin search and rescue operations," he commanded. "Help the survivors. Secure the area." His soldiers moved swiftly, spreading out across the ruins. They lifted heavy debris with ease, their strength unmatched. They carried wounded Xylarians to safety, their movements efficient and controlled. But even as they helped, there was no warmth in their actions, only duty. Their faces were cold, their eyes devoid of sympathy. To the Xylarians, these Deathworlders were terrifying. They moved like machines, unstoppable and unbreakable. A young Xylarian child, trembling with fear, hid behind a broken wall, watching the humans with wide eyes. Her mother tried to pull her back, whispering urgently, "Stay hidden. Don't let them see you." "But they're saving us," the child whispered, confusion and fear mixing in her voice. "They are Deathworlders," the mother replied, her voice shaking. "They are not like us. They know only war." Nearby, a group of Hylarian elders gathered, their faces pale with shock. One of them, his voice trembling, asked, "Are they friend or foe?" No one could answer. Lieutenant Kara Hayes led a squad through the ruins, her sharp eyes scanning for survivors. She moved swiftly, her posture rigid and focused. Her helmet's visor gleamed as she spoke through her comms. "Sector clear. Proceeding to the next zone." As she moved, she noticed a group of Hylarians staring at her, their faces filled with fear. She paused, her expression cold, before giving a brief nod. "You're safe now," she said, her voice flat. "We've dealt with the Kargath." The ex-Hylarians didn't respond. They only stared, their bodies trembling. To them, she was no savior. She was another monster, just as terrifying as the Kargath. Captain Ward watched from a distance, his jaw tight. He could see the fear in the Hylarians' eyes, the way they flinched at his soldiers' presence. But he did not care. Fear was a powerful tool. It kept people in line. It ensured obedience. "They fear us," Lieutenant Hayes noted, stepping up beside him. "They look at us like we're monsters." Ward's eyes remained cold. "Let them. Fear keeps them safe. It keeps them alive." Hayes hesitated, her expression hardening. "And if they see us as the enemy?" Ward's gaze did not waver. "Then we remind them who saved them, who ended the Kargath threat." The message was clear. Mercy was not their way. Strength was. Power was. And the humans, the Deathworlders, had more power than anyone in this galaxy could comprehend. As the last fires of battle died down, the humans continued their work, rescuing the survivors and securing the ruins. But their presence brought no comfort, only fear and awe. Above them, the fleet remained in orbit, their shadows casting darkness over the land. The ex-Hylarians looked up, seeing the massive warships hanging in the sky like ancient gods. They had prayed for salvation, but what they received was far more terrifying. They were saved by Deathworlders, creatures from a world of violence and danger. And now, those creatures stood among them, silent and powerful. The ex-Hylarians realized they were free from the Kargath, but they were far from safe. The humans had come, and nothing would ever be the same. The Kargath warlords stood on their command bridge, staring at the displays in shock and disbelief. Their crimson eyes widened, mandibles clicking with frustration. The human fleet hung in orbit, a wall of metal and firepower that blocked out the stars. Their warships were enormous, hulking behemoths bristling with cannons and missiles. Their hulls were dark and scarred, telling stories of countless battles, yet they remained undamaged, unchallenged by the Kargath's strongest weapons. How are they still standing?" One Kargath officer hissed, his claws digging into the console. "We hit them with everything." The warlord's eyes burned with rage. "They are Deathworlders," he growled, "creatures of violence and fury. They do not fall easily." But even he could not hide the fear in his voice. The humans had arrived, and their power was unlike anything the Kargath had ever faced. On the bridge of the Resolute Fury, Captain Elias Ward watched the Kargath fleet with cold, calculating eyes. His face was stone, his posture rigid. His soldiers stood at attention, awaiting his orders. "They're regrouping," Lieutenant Kara Hayes reported, her voice steady. "Trying to form a defensive line." Ward's lips curled into a grim smile. "It won't matter. Their defenses are weak. Their fear makes them predictable." He turned to his weapons officer. "Target their flagships. Break their command structure. Make them scatter." "Aye, Captain." The officer's hands danced over the controls. The ship's cannons charged, humming with lethal energy. Outside, the void of space lit up as the resolute Fury fired. Beams of plasma shot across the stars, slamming into the Kargath ships. Armor melted, shields shattered, and explosions erupted. The Kargath fleet panicked. Their formations fell apart, ships colliding as they tried to escape the onslaught. The human warships moved with precision, cutting off escape routes and closing in for the kill. The Kargath warlord's mandibles trembled with fury and fear. "Fight back. Show them no mercy," he roared. "We are the Kargath. We do not run." But his officers hesitated, their eyes wide with terror. They had never seen such firepower, such cold efficiency. The humans moved like predators, ruthless and unstoppable. On the surface of Xylaris, the Xylarians watched the battle unfold, their eyes fixed on the burning sky. They could see the flashes of light, hear the distant echoes of explosions. A young Xylarian trembled as he clung to his mother. Are they going to save us?" he whispered. His mother held him close, her face pale. "They are fighting the Kargath, but they are not our saviors. They are something else, something far more dangerous." Captain Ward watched the destruction unfold, his expression cold and unfeeling. He showed no mercy, no hesitation. His orders were swift, his tactics brutal. "Focus fire on their engines. Disable their mobility," he commanded. "Do not let them escape." The human fleet responded with lethal precision. Missiles streaked across the void, finding their targets with deadly accuracy. Kargath warships were torn apart, their engines exploding in fiery bursts. The Kargath warlord felt his ship shudder as the blast waves rocked his command bridge. He gripped his throne, his eyes burning with hatred. "Deathworlders, monsters," he spat. "They are demons from a cursed world." He turned to his crew, his voice shaking with rage. "Ram their flagship. If we are to die, we will take them with us." His officers hesitated, fear gripping their hearts. But the warlord's glare was fierce, and they knew disobedience meant death. The Kargath flagship roared forward, its engines burning at full power. On the resolute Fury, alarms blared as the enemy ship charged. Lieutenant Hayes's eyes widened. "Captain, they're coming right at us." Ward's gaze did not falter. "Brace for impact. Prepare to fire point defense systems." The Kargath ship barreled towards them, its hull glowing from the heat of its engines. It closed the distance rapidly, intent on collision. But just before impact, the resolute Fury fired. A barrage of plasma bolts struck the Kargath flagship, tearing through its armor and igniting its core. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash, pieces of debris scattering across the void. The shockwave rocked the human warship, but it held firm. Ward's face remained stone. "Pathetic," he muttered. "They fight with fury, but no discipline." Lieutenant Hayes looked at him, respect and fear mingling in her eyes. "They were willing to die just to take us down." Ward's expression hardened. "That's the difference between them and us. We don't waste our lives. We win." The Kargath fleet was broken. The survivors scattered, fleeing into the darkness of space. The battle was over, and the Deathworlders stood victorious. But victory brought no joy, no celebration. Only silence. Cold, unyielding silence. The Xylarians watched the human fleet, their hearts filled with fear and awe. They had begged for salvation, but the price was higher than they could have ever imagined. For they were saved by Deathworlders, creatures born of violence and war, and the galaxy would never be the same. The remnants of the Kargath fleet limped away, their once mighty warships now shattered and burning. Their cries of defeat echoed through the void as they scattered, broken and defeated. But the Xylarians were not celebrating. They stood on their ruined world, watching the sky as the human fleet loomed above them. Their saviors were terrifying, their power overwhelming. In the grand hall of Xylaris Prime, Chancellor Varric stood before a massive display, his eyes wide with fear. He watched as the human ships moved with eerie precision, their formations flawless. They crushed the Kargath. Without mercy, Varric whispered, his voice trembling. What? What have we called upon? Beside him, Advisor Selen's face was pale. We begged for help, and they answered. But these are not warriors of honor. They are Deathworlders. Varric's claws trembled as he turned to his council. We must show respect. If we offend them, we will share the Kargath's fate. The Xylarian leaders nodded, their faces grim. They had hoped for salvation, but they had summoned something far more dangerous. On the Resolute Fury, Captain Elias Ward stood before the main viewport, his hands clasped behind his back. His cold eyes watched the Kargath remnants flee, showing no pity, no remorse. Lieutenant Kara Hayes approached him, her voice low. Captain, the Xylarians are sending a transmission. They wish to express their gratitude and request a meeting. Ward's expression did not change. Gratitude. They fear us, as they should. He turned to his communication officer. Prepare a response. Inform them that we will meet, on our terms. Aye, Captain. Ward's gaze returned to the burning wreckage of the Kargath fleet. They begged for our help, but they do not understand what that truly means, he muttered. We are not saviors. We are conquerors. In the Grand Hall, the communication screen flickered, displaying the cold, unfeeling face of Captain Ward. His eyes were sharp, his presence commanding. Chancellor Varric bowed deeply, his voice shaking. Honored Deathworlder, we are eternally grateful for your aid. Without you, we would have perished. Ward's face remained emotionless. Your survival was convenient, but do not mistake mercy for weakness. Varric's heart raced. He could feel the chill of Ward's gaze, the power behind his words. We understand, Captain. We wish to offer tribute, to show our respect. Ward's eyes narrowed. Tribute. Interesting. He leaned closer, his voice cold. Do not offer what you cannot afford. We do not accept weakness. Varric's claws trembled. Oh, of course. We will provide whatever you desire. Our resources are yours. Ward's lips curled into a faint, cruel smile. Good. Then we will meet and discuss the terms of your gratitude. The transmission ended, the screen going dark. Silence filled the Grand Hall as the Xylarians stared at the empty display, their faces pale. Advisor Selen's voice was a whisper. They saved us, but they are not our allies. They are our new masters. Varric's shoulders slumped, his hope shattered. We called for help and invited death itself to our world. Outside, the human fleet remained motionless, their warships casting shadows over the ruined cities. Their presence was a reminder of their power, their dominance. On the Resolute Fury, Ward turned to his crew. Prepare the landing teams. We will meet the Xylarians and secure their loyalty. Lieutenant Hayes hesitated. Captain, do you believe they will resist? Ward's eyes were cold. They fear us too much to defy us. But fear alone is not enough. They must learn obedience. His voice hardened. We came because they called. Now they will answer to us. The Deathworlders were no heroes. They were conquerors, forged in the fires of a harsh world. Their power was unmatched, their will unbreakable. The Xylarians had begged for salvation, but they had gained something far more terrifying. They had invited Deathworlders into their lives, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Xylarians stood in silence as the human landing teams descended from the sky. Massive dropships broke through the clouds, their engines roaring as they touched down on the shattered surface of Tylerus Prime. The ground trembled beneath their weight. Chancellor Varric watched from the balcony of the Grand Hall, his heart pounding. His people gathered below, their faces filled with fear and awe as the humans emerged from their vessels. Clad in dark, imposing armor, they moved with perfect discipline, their weapons gleaming ominously. At the forefront walked Captain Elias Ward, his expression cold and calculating. His presence was terrifying, unyielding and unfeeling. He was the embodiment of power. Advisor Selen whispered, They look like machines, like they feel nothing. Varric swallowed hard. They are Deathworlders. Their hearts are as cold as their world. The great doors of the grand hall opened as Ward and his entourage entered. The Exilarians bowed deeply, their bodies trembling as the humans marched forward without hesitation. Ward's eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail before he stopped before Varric. His voice was cold. "Chancellor Varric, you called, and we answered." Varric bowed lower, his voice shaking. "Great Captain Ward, we are eternally grateful. You saved us from annihilation. Our lives are yours." Ward's gaze was piercing. "Your gratitude is noted, but words mean nothing without action." Varric looked up, his eyes pleading. We offer our resources, our loyalty. Anything you desire." Ward's lips curled into a slight smirk. "Anything?" He turned to his officers. "Begin the assessment. I want a full report on their technology, resources, and strategic value." His officers moved swiftly, their movements precise and calculated. They began scanning the hall, their devices humming with energy. The Exilarians watched with fear as their world was measured and evaluated. Varric's voice wavered. "Captain, we are a peaceful people. We have little in the way of weapons or military strength." Ward's eyes were cold. "I did not come here for soldiers. I came for obedience." He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. "Your people will serve us. Your resources will fuel our fleet. Your planet is now under our protection." Varric's heart sank. Protection or occupation? Ward's smirk widened. "That depends on your loyalty." The room grew cold as his words echoed through the hall. The Exilarians had begged for help, and they had been saved. But their saviors were not benevolent. They were conquerors. Ward turned to his officers. "Begin the integration process. I want their infrastructure under our control by the end of the cycle." "Aye, Captain," his officers responded, their voices emotionless. Varric's claws trembled as he realized the truth. The Exilarians were no longer free. Their world, their people, their future, all belonged to the Deathworlders. Advisor Selen whispered, We made a deal with devils." Varric's shoulders slumped. "No, devils are merciful compared to them." Ward's gaze turned to the balcony, where he looked down at the gathered Xylarians. His voice echoed with authority. "Citizens of Xylaris, your world is now under the protection of the Deathworlder fleet. Obey, and you will prosper. Defy, and you will face the same fate as your enemies." His words were cold, final. There was no room for resistance, no hope for rebellion. The Exilarians were conquered. Varric lowered his head, his voice breaking. "We called for salvation and lost everything." Ward's eyes remained emotionless as he turned away. To him, the Exilarians were not people. They were assets, useful but insignificant. He spoke to his officers, his voice commanding, "Prepare the fleet. We move to secure the next sector. This galaxy will learn to fear us." His officers saluted. "Understood, Captain." Ward's eyes gleamed with determination. He was not a hero. He was a Deathworlder, unstoppable, unyielding, and unmerciful. The Exilarians had begged for salvation, but the price was their freedom. They had called for help and lost their world. The days passed in heavy silence on Xylaris Prime. The once bustling cities were now occupied by human soldiers, their watchful eyes never resting. The streets were orderly, but the air was filled with fear. The Exilarians moved quietly, their spirits crushed. They obeyed every command, their faces pale with submission. The Deathworlders were everywhere, guarding, observing, controlling. Chancellor Varric stood at his office window, looking over his city, now under human rule. He felt like a prisoner in his own world. Advisor Selen entered quietly, her face heavy with worry. "Chancellor, the humans are taking full control of our communication networks. Our people, they are losing hope. Varric's shoulders sagged. Hope? We have none left. We gave it away the day we called for help. Selen's voice was a whisper. Is there nothing we can do? Varric shook his head. Their power is absolute. Their technology, their strength. We cannot fight them. His eyes fell on the human banners now hanging over their sacred buildings, a cruel reminder of their defeat. Suddenly, a loud voice echoed through the city. Captain Ward stood on a grand platform, his presence commanding. His voice was cold and unwavering. Citizens of Xylaris, you are now under the rule of the Deathworlder fleet. Your safety is guaranteed, as long as you obey. But rebellion will not be tolerated. His words were sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. There was no kindness, no mercy, only power. Varric's claws dug into his desk. This is not protection. This is enslavement. Selen looked at him with pleading eyes. Chancellor, we cannot give up. There must be a way to fight back. Varric turned away from the window, his voice hollow. Fight. Against them. We are nothing compared to their might. Our people would be destroyed. But as he spoke, his eyes fell on an old emblem, a symbol of Xylarians' courage and unity. It was a reminder of who they once were, a proud people who had never bowed to fear. His heart stirred. Could they truly give up without trying? Would they live in chains forever? His eyes hardened with resolve. Maybe we cannot fight them directly, but we can resist, quietly, patiently. Selen's eyes widened. You mean rebellion? Varric's voice dropped to a whisper. No. Survival. We will endure. We will learn their ways, understand their weaknesses, and one day, we will be free again. Selen's eyes glowed with hope. Yes, we will not be broken. Varric turned to the window once more, his gaze fixed on Captain Ward. The Deathworlder stood tall, proud of his conquest. But he did not understand the Xylarians. He did not know their spirit. Varric's claws unclenched. His fear melted away, replaced by determination. We will wait. We will watch. And when the time comes, we will rise. In the streets below, the Xylarians listened to Captain Ward's speech. Their eyes were downcast, their faces expressionless. But beneath their silence, a spark of hope flickered. They would endure. They would survive. And one day, the silence would be broken. Captain Ward turned away from the crowd, confident in his victory. He did not see the defiant eyes watching from the shadows. He did not hear the whispers of resistance. He believed the Xylarians were defeated, but he was wrong. The Deathworlders had conquered their world, but they had not conquered their spirit. The fight was far from over. It was only just beginning.